Happy Thursday, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Lean Coaching for Lean Coaches. How y'all doing today? I'm so stoked for today. As per usual, that's what the kids say. No, they don't say that. That would not, no, they would be kicked out of their friend group if they said that. But I'm so excited, again, as I said, to be here that I'm saying I'm so excited for the third straight time. We're going to be talking about a really important topic to me right now. It feels very relevant and hits for me, and I hope it does for you too. And I want to invite you into the conversation as well around this topic of vulnerability that we're going to be talking about today. And this is relevant to me in my coaching practice, and it's something that I'm really looking to lean into more. And as a coach, my jam is helping you as a lean coach or consultant to move forward into starting your own, or if you're struggling, helping you get unstuck through that. That's what I love doing every single day of the week, and helping really end, as one of my coaches talks about, ending the suffering in the world. And for me, it's ending suffering for lean coaches and consultants. And that's what we love to do as people. We love to help others with their problems and challenges and their suffering and a process, whether it's on the line, in the office, or even on their computer. That's what I love doing for you as a lean coach. So shoot me a DM if I can be of help, and let's have a conversation. But today, as I said in the whole run up, it's about vulnerability. And even as I was prepping for this morning and thinking about this, it's like, oh man, I should get on and look up Brene Brown and her definition, because if you're familiar with Brene Brown and her work, vulnerability is something that she really leans into. And if you want to explore more of this topic around that, you can certainly look up. She's got multiple TED Talks and whatnot about this. But I'd love to know, and I want this to be like a conversation. I got three kind of points to talk through about vulnerability, and multiple stories that have really been relevant for me here recently. But I really love to hear from you what, in terms of marketing, sales, how do you feel like vulnerability plays into those things? What do you feel like is the most important pieces around vulnerability for you? Would love to hear more about that, and what that is for you. Um, One of the things that, and just being completely honest here, I just looked at my LinkedIn invite, and I'm seeing that it said that this was actually scheduled for 7 p.m. today. So this is what happens when you create an event at um, that time, and I'm seeing that it's not even being up on LinkedIn right now. So that's wonderful. But we're going to keep going, because this is what we do. Um, so I'm hoping that you'll be able to catch this, um, and uh, and there'll be a good conversation that happens later as you watch this around vulnerability. And so there we have it, vulnerability. I didn't push the PM to the AM. And so that brings me to my very first point. And one of the things that really triggered this conversation was me thinking about this idea of, in a coaching group that I'm a part of, we talk about this idea of how, um, for me yesterday, I was talking about being stuck in a specific space, especially around my sales process, and feeling like I'm getting out there, I'm having these conversations, and things aren't working. I'm feeling frustrated. And one of the coaches on the call said, "Hey, Sam, if it's not working, try the opposite. If it's not working, try the opposite. What are you, if this thing that you're doing isn't working, why are you continuing to do it? It's the definition of insanity." And so that's the thing that for me is something that's very relevant to me is, um, you know, if it's not working, try the opposite. Um, So yeah, that's what's really hitting for me right now. And the 3 points that I wanted to share with you today are I go first. And I think what's relevant about this for me, and the 3 points I want to share with you today, and I'm still in my head about having this on the PM instead of AM. But the cool thing is that we'll record this, and you'll get the replay later tonight if you're watching it at 7 p.m. Did this at 7 a.m. So brilliant. Would still love to have your thoughts as you engage with this and watch it, whether it's live or recorded. Um, so the 3 points that I want to talk about today is I go first, hurt people, help people, and sense something, say something. So this is all around this idea of marketing and sales. And I think, like I was saying, what prompted this was this idea that I'm not feeling like a lot of my, calls with, exploration calls, people that I'm seeking to support, sales calls, like I'm having lots of great conversations, but in the end, like those people aren't moving forward to work together. So if that's not working, I need to try something different. And so it's bringing me back to some of these notes that I've gotten and learned from others and is reminding me to go back to again. So this first point of I go first. And I think of this picture that someone shared with me before, and I think it was actually in a marriage counseling session one time early on in Cindy and I's marriage, where was really struggling and like, okay, if I'm upset or hurt, how do I go about sharing that? And I was always waiting for Sid to go first, like, hey, um, but the reality is, it's like, I forget the whole picture, but it's basically a turtle. Um, has to go on its basically as a turtle you become vulnerable when you flip yourself over, and there's no way that you cannot be, um, that's basically a position of being exposed, like there's an opportunity to be hurt in that scenario. And so this idea of going first is becoming like the turtle, like a turtle, and flipping yourself over, becoming vulnerable, um, in those conversations, in the content that you're sharing. So, how can I be like the turtle and flip myself on my shell and share what's going on for me? And a part of that is doing something like this, where I'm sharing, hey, there's a struggle here. And at that point, right, um, it reminds me of this book that I read about 7 years ago called This Is Awkward by Sammy Rhodes. And he's a comedian. And in it, the whole premise he talks about, what appealed to me about this book is because, well, I feel like I'm pretty freaking awkward. And so it was like, oh, this makes sense to me. I can relate to that because I have those moments quite often on a daily basis where I'm just feeling like, oh, yeah, this is awkward. And so I pulled the book out from the shelf and I started reading the first few pages, and it just hit home for me because his main premise is that when we feel like we have those awkward moments, like the awkward pause, or we said something that was uncomfortable, or whatever the case may be, that is actually a moment where we are working to be vulnerable. We're putting ourselves out there. We're looking for an opportunity to connect with someone, and it doesn't come off right, so to speak. So I love the premise of that book, and he talks about it in like his marriage, in his relationship with his kids, in his struggle with pornography and sexual addiction. He has all these different areas, his relationship with God, um, and community. So, all these places where he has felt very awkward. And he's just basically sharing the premise of, okay, this is my way of being vulnerable. And so I think for us as, people that are either entrepreneurs, consultants, looking to be those, and even if you're in the business, being able to have this premise of I go first and flipping ourselves over, being the one that goes first and is vulnerable is so impactful. Um, and I think it's something where we can't expect others, like if we're a consultant, um, and we're going into a business, and or even a coach, or going in to have a conversation with someone to work together, um, we can't expect them to share their challenges if we're not at some level lowering our guard down too. um, and so I just think about when we often go into those conversations or we're posting content, and I'm guilty of this as well as anybody, is I want to look like I have the answer, that I've got the formula that's going to lead to success for you. Otherwise, why would you do business for me with me? Why would you pay me money to help you and go, "Oh, yeah, well, I'm asking like for this exchange, like I'm going to help you with this and this." And I think in that vulnerability, though, it's like, oh, okay, he's actually a real human being. And when you go in, let's say, and you're going to do an evaluation of a company, and you want to help them with doing some, creating a lean culture, doing daily stand ups or problem solving. And you're trying to understand, we talk about this often, of what their big problem is. If you're not willing to share some of your stuff, the trust isn't going to be built. And then you're not going to be able to get an honest picture of what's actually going on. And if you don't get an honest picture of what's actually going on, you don't know how you can help them, or if you can even be a help in that space. So, this is why this I go first is so powerful. It may feel like, oh my gosh, I'm being, or there may be even some awkward moments, but uh, the prompt or the call to action here is to actually just do it, to just try, right? You're not sharing all your shit, right? You're not going to be like sharing all of the details of your life or your journey or all that, but something where you're opening yourself up to them. And so I think that that is so powerful. I go first. Next piece um, is hurt people, help people. Now, this might like be mind bending because I know we have all heard the phrase hurt people. And this reframe was a phrase that I got from one of my coaches, Troy Duranko, on a weekly coaching call I have with this group called Coaches Mentors. It's a group that we meet every week, and we talk about challenges that we're having as um, coaches in business. And this is kind of a mantra that Troy often talks about with us in terms of being vulnerable. And he said this yesterday, and it just rang like crazy in my head because I've used that phrase, hurt people, people, hurt people, hurt people, when I'm in spaces and somebody's sharing about, a hard relationship or conversation they've had, and they'll say, "Well, hurt people, hurt people." That's what I share with them, right? We probably all said it at one point in time or another. And he had this reframe yesterday, and it just blew my mind because it's like, yeah, I think that if I share my challenges, my hurts, my foibles, that's not the word, but like all my edges, that people are going to be scared away. And the reality is, when you share those hurts, those challenges, those struggles, it actually draws people in. And you can use those experiences as mm, as a space, especially if you've done some reflection, and you can use that learning and say, "Hey, I've been there. I've been down that road." Like for me, I've been down the road of being told no like 3 times in a day to an offer of support. So I know what it feels like to be told no. and then to be like, okay, how am I going to get back up again tomorrow and have the next conversation with someone that I'm looking to support? I've been there. So just to say, like, oh, here's all the shiny sales numbers and all the conversations I'm having, how my posts are doing and all those things, versus, you know what, this is the struggle. I get it. And I understand your pain, and I know I can help you with that because I've been there before. Um, and one other phrase that I love that my coach Troy he uses quite often, and I think is really a powerful one as well, is when you're in those spaces and you're thinking about sharing things in your content. And I'm talking about these conversations and mainly in kind of the frame of an exploration call or a discovery call, a sales call, and its vulnerability is a superpower. Vulnerability is a superpower. And I think too often we look at it as a weakness, that we see all of our edges as things to make up and to gloss over and to put a pretty face on. And that's just not what draws people in, and helps you connect at a certain level. Now, I can hear you say, and I had this comment from someone the other day, and I totally understand this. And it's sometimes you're so tired of bushwhacking that you just want to um, see the path. Like you want to have some type of path before you. So if you're on a call and you're like, I totally get you. This is all my frustration. And you're just being vulnerable about like not having all the answers, like, and there's no formula, then I get it. There can be like, okay, well, there's got to be something to hold on to. So I'm not like advocating that you don't have a process, you don't have some way of thinking about how to help the person. Obviously, you're coming in, you're going to add value and help them. You wouldn't be having a conversation if you didn't feel good about being able to help that person. At the same time, you're going to be sharing, yeah, I've been down that road. I've stumbled like so many times. And even in the moment, like in the past week, I've had this challenge with XYZ. Oh, okay. You're a real human being. Um, so I think it's that tension. And I'd love to hear your comments on this too, about, hurt people, help people. Does that ring true? Does that be like, well, I'd love to hear your thoughts on hurt people, help people, because I think this was one that I'm going to be sitting with for a while and is going to be mind bending for me too, for a little bit. But I think it's helpful to like reflect on and think about, um, as well. The last point, um, that I want to share with you today is sense something and say something. Now, the first two pieces, I really feel like I go first. Something like in your content, sharing something in your content that might be a little more vulnerable than what you would normally share. Like you might, and I see this a lot, like go on to Chat GPT. Here's the topic. Help me write like 7 bullet points about waste in X type of business, and then write a post about that. What I think I go first looks like is sharing a story about how fumbled around with waste, or you're struggling with waste in your business, or you did it and you tried this and this worked and this didn't. And being vulnerable and open about that versus just giving the tick, 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 tick. All right. Because people will be more engaged in your content and want to reach out to you, which that's what we're all looking to do, is to have a conversation. We've talked about this before. But if the whole point of you being on LinkedIn is to grow your business, build connections, that's the way you're going to do it. You're not going to do it by like, here's the 7 ways. And in this space, that's not unique. You're not offering something for somebody to be like, oh man, yes, thank you for giving me the 8 ways that I could find all over the internet. I could plug it into Chat GPT, or I could watch a 5 minute, I could look up 3,000 videos on YouTube about that. Provide something that is like the information, but is also a story where you're being vulnerable. So that's how I'm looking at the I go first, and then the hurt people help people is sharing those stories and pieces in your marketing, especially in your content that convey that. Like, okay, here's me 100%. You're seeing me because people will sense as you're putting it. One of my coach Troy, he said yesterday, I can read a post and within 2 seconds I can tell if it's bullshit, right? And you know that too. I know that too. We should just be like all honest about when we see a post and we know somebody filtered it through like some AI thing and it's not their actual story. So be vulnerable in your marketing. Go first in your marketing. And this last piece, send something, say something. This really has a lot more to do with um, those marketing, those sales calls. Now, this could be something you frame in terms of your marketing. But what I think about for this, especially for those as like consultants, coaches, those where when you're having like an interaction with somebody, whether it's in person or on Zoom, is when you sense something, the energy that's in the room, something that's um, challenging or an emotion, somebody's like feeling a certain way, then say something. And that's vulnerable. That's vulnerable. I had two conversations yesterday with different folks, um, and two opportunities, conversations where there was a potential to support somebody in the work that they were doing. And two opportunities came up to when I like, sent something. Um, I'm just trying to think because for sure in the second one was more of a not necessarily sensing something in the person, but sensing the conversation moving in a certain direction and then putting yourself out there. So in the first conversation, sensing some resistance or some like hesitation or fear. And, old Sam would be like, okay, right, I'm not going to say something because I'm afraid if I say something, then they're going to not want to do, they're not going to want to work with me. And I'm just done with that, quite frankly. Now, of course, there'll be future conversations, but I'm done with that. I'm done with the not like sensing that energy. We both can feel it, and then not like being vulnerable and brave enough to say something. Yeah, you know what? I'm really sensing that there is some hesitation here. Can you tell me more about that? And it wasn't perfect. I will be 100% honest. It felt a little awkward, but that comes back to that whole premise we talked about in the beginning of when you feel that sense of awkwardness, and this is just I'm processing it out loud right now, is there was that moment of vulnerability. Oh my gosh, if I say something here like, oh, this could really, um, they could be like, nah, Sam, like I'm not feeling you, or why are you asking that, or that whole fear of the pushback. The reality was in that first scenario, they came back and were like, yeah, like this situation, this feels like a lot for me in the way you would want to work together. Like this feels like this amount of work together feels like a lot for me right now. And that was like, okay, that opened up a further conversation to see, okay, what's going to be helpful in terms of working together? What kinds of ways of working together would be helpful for you right now to help you move forward? And that led to like a really good movement forward versus just leaving it out there like that unsaid thing. I chose to step forward and like say, okay, be vulnerable. Like, hey, I'm sensing this. So again, sense something, say something, and you can feel the energy. You've been doing it long enough. You know what I'm talking about. You've had those conversations with friends, with your partner, on with colleagues that you're having where you can feel like the tension, the anger, the excitement, whatever those emotions are, you can feel it. You can feel it on Zoom, you can feel it in person. We've all had those experiences. Now the choice is just, are you going to say something about that in that moment? And again, it's scary because you're being vulnerable. They could tell you you're full of shit and like piss off. But your job really isn't to um, worry about their reaction. Your job is to show up and say something in that moment, and be brave, be vulnerable. The second situation, conversation yesterday, it was a conversation where someone had said, "Hey, Sam, I think you should chat with this person. They're doing some good work, and it might be a good opportunity to have a conversation about, working together. Just have a conversation and see where it goes." And I said, "All right, cool. That sounds great." So we had this conversation yesterday, and we started talking about their work, what they're doing, what's going on at the organization they're at, some of the challenges. I shared some of my story, and you could just feel the energy there. And I could feel like, okay, this could be somebody that I could support in their journey. So it was like the conversation wasn't necessarily set up as it explicitly like, okay, this is a exploration call, but I could feel and sense in that moment that this is a person that is could use the support, and I knew I could support them in their journey. So it just being able to sense that and saying, "Hey, would you, um, you know, what do you think about this?" And that had been prompted by that person saying, "Well, how do you work with folks in a corporate setting?" And so the conversation went in that direction. So just being open to noticing and sensing what's going on, and then stepping into it and actually being willing to be awkward and vulnerable in those moments. Man, I'm not going to lie, it's a challenge, but we, like anything else, we build that muscle through practice. It's like anything else we talk about here over and over again. These things happen by repeated practice over time. You don't get like um, great at sensing by like reading a book on sensing. You get good at sensing by like being in the conversation, being present, and when you feel that energy, then you say something. Now it's gonna be freaking awkward and uncomfortable those times you do it, and maybe even after you practice it for a while. There's that. I'm guessing. But doing it and trying it and practicing it, my mantra about here. Let's stop reading about it and let's actually start doing it. That's the whole premise of this lean coaching for lean coaches. So again, vulnerability. I go first, hurt people, help people, and sense something, say something. If things aren't working for you, you got to try the opposite. I love that reframe. So thank you. Shout out to Christos, my coach there, for that reframe. And if things aren't working for you in where you're at right now and moving forward, either launching your business, getting that lean business off the ground, or in like in the business itself, it's not working. Let's have a conversation. I mean, I'm excited for Tuesday, and it's going to be at 8 a.m. We'll be at 8 a.m. A little adjustment to the time, not as late as what this was scheduled for, but 8 a.m. Show up 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 Eastern time on Tuesday. You're not going to want to miss it. Katie Anderson will be in the space, and we're going to have a conversation, open and vulnerable conversation about her journey with sales and marketing over the past 10 years. Of course, she has her Shingo Award-winning book, Learning to Lead, Leading to Learn, and then, of course, her podcast, Chain of Learning. And she's going to come on and share some great insights and thoughts. So bring your questions. We're going to dig in. She's going to be sharing openly about her journey. And I want you to come and bring in your fire questions on Tuesday, 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 Eastern. And as always, thank you once again for being here. We'll get the time right. We'll figure this out. This is me just being awkward. And thank you so much for being here with me today on Lean Coaching for Lean Coaches. Have a great weekend, everybody.